everybody, welcome into another exciting math class. Here we are in chapter number 1, lesson number 6. If you have your books, that is going to show up on page number 22. Page number 22. And today we're going to talk about the order and absolute value. Order and absolute value. One way that we're going to talk about order is by using the number line. Now, I personally don't love the number line as far as teaching a whole lot of concepts on it, but what I do find a lot of value in the number line is helping you to understand the relationship between the numbers. And numbers do have a relationship together. They occupy the same amount of space between each other. The whole numbers do. And the number line is a great way to show that. There's relationships with the number 0, how far away they are from 0. There's relationships to the right and the left side on the number line. A lot of different interesting things with the number line. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to put a number line onto the board here. And one thing that's interesting with the number line is that it does go in both directions infinitely. So it goes to the right as far as it can go, and it goes to the left as far as it can go. There's no stopping the number line. Okay. Interesting. There's different people in mathematics, high level mathematics. They want to argue about infinity and does it exist and how does it exist, and it can exist because nothing can truly be infinite. But as a Christian, I believe that obviously the numbers can be infinite because an infinite creator created them. God created numbers, and he created them to be infinite just like he's infinite. And so something interesting here as we kind of talk about the number line, I think you see a lot of connections there to just the nature of God himself being an infinite God, and numbers having and no ending either. And something that's interesting here, I'll stop and while I'm on this rabbit trail. If we put two numbers, 0 and 1, for example, there's also, this is crazy to think about, there is infinity in numbers between those two numbers. What do I mean by that? Well, you could have you could have point, if I can get it to do right here. You could have point 0, 1. That goes in between here. Okay. You could have point 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. That also goes in between here. You could have point 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. That goes in between there. In other words, you can, using decimals, you can have as many decimals as you want. You can have infinity, point infinity 0, 1. Not that that's really a thing. In between there. So infinite numbers can actually go in between numbers. It's crazy. So the number line shows us these relationships, and the infinite number of possibilities that are there with it is just, it literally is mind blowing. Some of you may have just had your mind blown. You're like, I never thought of that. I never thought that there's infinite numbers in between numbers, but there are. There's infinite number of decimal points that can go in between numbers. So it's really crazy to think about, and it helps you really to kind of understand a little bit more of the qualities of God himself. And okay, so let's talk a little bit about this number line and some different things about it. When we use the number line, you already saw me do this. I first of all start with a line going left and right, and I put arrows on the end of both of them. In the middle of the number line, you designate a number to start with. And it doesn't have to be 0, but a lot of times you do start the number line with 0 in the middle. It just kind of gives you, a lot of it depends on what you're trying to show on the number line, what numbers you're trying to put out there, things like that. But this one we're going to start with 0. It's a good starting point, it's a good reference point. The reason we're going to start with 0 is because I'm going to try to show you the positive and negative idea of the number line. As we go to the right, So as we go this way, the numbers are going to get bigger and bigger. These are positive numbers. So they get bigger the farther you go to the right. So if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we'll put 5 on this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? And 1 is smaller than 5. Okay? Because it's farther to the left. 5 is bigger than 1 because it's farther to the right. So then logically, the farther you go to the left, the smaller the numbers get. And this is also what we would call the negative side of the number line. Once you hit 0, you go to negative numbers. So -1, -2, -3, -4, and -5. So there's a positive side and a negative side. The numbers as you go to the right are getting bigger. The numbers that you go to the left are getting smaller. Um, let's see, what else do we need to know here? The order, the idea of order and relationship I talked about in the opening. Let's talk about order and relationship. Well, these numbers are in order. -5, -4, -3, -2, -1, 0. We're counting. We're counting in order. We wouldn't say -5, -2, -4, 2, -3, 5, there's no order to that. Okay? So we go in order when we count. So there's order. But there's also relationship. Notice that each one of these is the same distance away from the other one. Now, my number line isn't perfect, but you can get the idea. It's the same space away from it. So we can use, there's 3 different ways to order numbers, put numbers in order. So there is, the numbers can be equal, okay? So I could have 1 equals 1. Numbers can be equal because you could have it's the same number. Numbers can also be, that's greater than, and numbers can also be less than. So let me write that, equal, greater, and less than. Equal, greater, and less. Those are the 3 relationships that numbers can have. Numbers cannot have any other relationships based on the number line. That's the only 3. And here's the interesting thing. They can only be one of those. They can only be one of those. So let's say I have the number 1 and the number 2. Well, what relationship does the number 1 and the number 2 have? Or what, better said, what relationship does the number 1 have to the number 2? And you would say that the number 1 is less than the number 2. Okay, that's the only relationship. It can't have another relationship there. It can only be one of those. So in that one, it's this, and these ones, it cannot be those. And so some of you are thinking, well, but Mr. Steve, I've heard of this before. I've heard less than or equal to. Yes, but then you're adding a condition. You're saying or equal to. And so we'll get to that later, but I'm talking about 2 numbers can only have one relationship at a time. Here's another example. -2 to 2. -2 to 2. What would that one be? -2 is less than. Now I want you to see something very interesting about this. And let me do another one. Let me do 4 and 2. Well, 4 is greater than 2. 4 is greater than 2. So look at what's happening right here. The less than is pointing to the left. You got it. The less is pointing to the left, and the greater is pointing to the right, just like our number line. If we go back up here to our number line, the bigger ones pointing to the right. The smaller ones are pointing to the left. So less points left, greater points right. That might help you out when you're writing those less than and greater than signs. And I think we've all dealt with equal enough that we know what equal is. Equal is equal. Equal means the exact same thing. All right. Um, the next concept that I want to share with you on this number line is the concept of absolute value. Absolute value, and I'll write this down so you can see it. Absolute value um, here's what it means. Here's the best definition that I can give you. Absolute value is let me write the numbers. The numbers distance from zero. In other words, how far away from zero is it? That's absolute value. Okay? Let's take an example. The number 5. We'll put our dot on the number 5. What is the absolute value of 5? Well, how many spaces away from 0 is it? We can count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're on 0. Okay? And so this has an absolute value of 5. And with absolute value, we put these little sticks on both sides of it. So it looks like basically it has a stick here, the number 5, and then another stick here. And that's the absolute value sign, okay? So now watch this. If the absolute value of 5 is 5, what is the absolute value of negative 5? We'll go over here to the negative 5 side. Well, let's look at the definition. The numbers distance from 0. Well, how far is negative 5 away from 0? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we're at 0 again. So the absolute value of negative 5 is also 5. 5 units. Negative 5's absolute value is 5. Just 5. Positive 5, I guess, but just 5. Um, so, in other words, all absolute values are always written in positive numbers or just in values. How many place values away from 0 did we go? Okay, so that's how we do absolute value. That's on page 23 in your book if you're looking there. We're just counting the number of units we're traveling to get to 0. All right. I think that's all I got for you. We could do a couple of these and not using the number line. Let's do these without using the number line. Let's just kind of imagine the number line in our head. Let's just do a couple of these little problems, just examples. What is the absolute value of negative 15? Well, negative 15 is how many spaces away from 0? 15 spaces. That's how we write that. What if I had the absolute value of 4 plus 3? What does that equal? Well, 4 spaces plus 3 spaces equals how many spaces? 7 spaces. Okay. You could write it like this if you wanted, but then you have to simplify it by taking it outside. The final answer is outside of the absolute value because you're just telling me how many spaces. The question is asking how many spaces away or what is the absolute value, not don't give me the absolute value inside the absolute value sign. Take it out of the absolute value sign. All right, one more thing. If I have a negative and then a value, so let's put 15 back there. Okay, let me change the color of that so you can see that a little bit better. And I'll scroll it down. So absolute value of 15. Negative outside absolute value of 15 equals what? Well, check this out. What is the absolute value of 15? How many spaces away from 0 is it? Well, it's 15 spaces. So basically, we take the 15 outside of the sign. But look what's waiting for it outside. The answer to that would actually be negative 15. Because the absolute value sign is outside waiting for the value to come out of the absolute value sign. That's an important concept because we're going to be using that in algebra as we continue. Okay. All right. I think that does it. If you have any questions there, you can always rewind it and see if you can figure out what's going on there. All right. Hope you have a good rest of your day. See you later.